15 different countries around the world. I'm going to do a quick introduction. My name is Steve Emmets from Emmets Publishing. We're then going to have a reading from the audio version of Jeremy Brett is Sherlock Holmes featuring Luke Barton. We have a world exclusive first performance of a tribute to Jeremy Brett, A Case of Identity from Don't Go Into the Cellar Theatre. And then we have a absolute plethora of Sherlockian experts for our Jeremy Brett panel. So welcome to everybody and good evening to everybody around the world. And for some of you, especially a big thank you, as it's early in the morning already on Sunday in several of the countries. So welcome to everybody. MX Publishing was founded 15 years ago. We've been publishing Sherlock Holmes books now for 13 years. We mentioned earlier that our very first author, Alistair Duncan, is on the line today. We published Eliminate the Impossible in 2008. And since then, it's been a real roller coaster. We now have over 150 authors writing wonderful Sherlock Holmes fiction, non-fiction for us. And we have over 500 books out in print in lots of different formats, including audio, as you'll hear tonight. We have had over 2 million books sold and in lots of different languages now as well. We're a social enterprise, so everybody that works at MX is a volunteer. We support 3 main causes: Stepping Stone School in the UK, Happy Life Children's Home in Kenya, and the United Nations World Food Programme. We're involved in some others as well, but these are our main ones. A little bit about Stepping Stone School. It's a school for children with learning disabilities. We've been working with them since 2009, and I've been a patron of the school since 2016. We do a lot of fundraising for them. We've raised a little over $80,000. Hopefully by the end of next year, we'll break through that 100,000 mark. And we do quite a lot of events and awareness, and many of the attendees and on the line and the panelists have participated with us at events at Undershaw. And that's a photo of the old building and the new building down there at Undershaw. And it's the former home of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, where he wrote a lot of the Sherlock Holmes stories. So Happy Life Children's Home is one of our passion projects. We've been working with them since 2012. We're mentors, Sharon and I, and we spend every Christmas at Happy Life. We've been doing that for the last 8 years. Unfortunately, this year we weren't able to go because of COVID, but we've been involved in quite a lot of events and awareness and projects with them. And in fact, the pandemic has been a really interesting time for us working with Happy Life. They decided that they wanted to plant lots of trees last year in 2020, and we came up with a project called Books to Trees. So for every book that we sold on the website, we would plant a tree at Happy Life, and we funded 1,000 trees, many of which are fruit trees to help with the food situation under the pandemic. We currently have a project where every book that's sold on the website contributes to our Books to Books program, and we're aiming to support them building their library and their schools. So we're aiming to fund 2,000 books there. We're also heavily involved with the United Nations World Food Programme. We're particularly involved with the Innovation Accelerator, which is based out of Munich in Germany. And we've been working with them since 2017. I'm a technology mentor with them. And we get involved with their boot camps and one-to-one mentoring. And we're incredibly proud to have been part of the team that won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2020. One of our big projects is the MX Book of New Sherlock Holmes Stories. Many of the, some of the people on the line and some of the panelists have contributed as well. It's 27 volumes. The 3 big volumes are coming out in May. We've had 150 plus authors taking part, including some wonderful New York Times bestselling authors, Lee Child, Nicholas Mayer, Bonnie McBird, who's on the line tonight on our panel, Lindsay Fay, etc. Over 600 stories, 10,000 pages. I think it's 3 or 4 million words now, and we're publishing new volumes each year. Loads of great reviews there as well. And this year we launched the Sherlock Holmes Book Club, where people can subscribe and get one of the hardcover storybooks each month. Another big project we're involved with is a fascinating subscription service in the States called Dear Homes. So this was launched in 2018, and every week you get letters through the post. So you get 4 letters through the post during the month, and the idea is to try and solve the mystery. So the letters are written to Sherlock Holmes, and you receive them, and you can see how fast you can solve the mystery. And we are behind the cases there. So our wonderful authors provide the cases. Another major project that we've launched in 2019 is The Art of Sherlock Holmes, created and curated by Phil Growick out of Florida in West Palm Beach, partnered with the Conan Doyle estate to help artists create new pieces of art linked to Sherlock Holmes stories. So we've published 4 books, and we have a virtual gallery on the website. We'll be emailing out these slides to everybody afterwards so that you'll have all of the links, but you can actually go around the gallery, walk around the gallery and look at the 56 pieces of art. And some of the originals are still available. Most of the originals have now been sold, but there are prints and things like that. A big shout out to our friends at Mondadori in Italy. And I know we have some Italians on the line today. They're the largest publisher there, and we have provided over 50 novels into Italian for their Igallo Mondadori collection. And we are still sending more over to them as well. It's a fantastic project. A little introduction to our first performer this evening, Luke Barton. So Luke is an actor, Sherlock Holmes actor, trained at the Oxford School of Drama. He's toured on 2 continents. I think he's going to correct me if I get this wrong now. 2 continents in Europe and Asia as Sherlock Holmes, and also performed in the wonderful One Man, Two Governors as well. And Luke is the narrator behind Jeremy Brett is Sherlock Holmes, and Luke will be performing from that in just a moment's time. Right after Luke, we will be having the worldwide exclusive first performance of A Case of Identity, performed by Jonathan Goodwin of Don't Go Into the Cellar Theatre. We've worked with Jonathan and the team to deliver multiple Sherlock Holmes adaptations. And a bit of a shout out, the theatre company is completely reliant on tickets and donations under the pandemic. So we will be sharing a link to the donation page, and MX will be matching all of the donations for the first £125 of donations that are made. If you enjoy the performance, please give a few pounds. It costs around £250 a week to keep the theatre going under the pandemic. So it'd be wonderful if you could support Don't Go Into the Theatre. Sorry, don't go into the cellar, don't go to the theatre. Yeah, you can't go into the theatre, we're under a pandemic. And our panel, a little introduction to our panel, and we'll be getting a little introduction to each of them as we go forward. So Roger Johnson from the Sherlock Holmes Society of London, Bonnie McBird, author, actor, director, loads of fantastic credits, and there's the cover of Bonnie's new book, The Three Locks. It's a 4th Sherlockian pastiche novel. Jay Ganguly, coming up to 2 o'clock in the morning now for Jay from the Sherlock Holmes Society of London. Thank you so much, Jay, for joining. First compilation of books of stories is coming out in June, which is a continuum of Sherlock Holmes stories, which is a collection of many of the stories she's delivered into the MX book and other places. We also have Maureen Whitaker, who is the author of Jeremy Brett Playing a Part, and the Jeremy Brett is Sherlock Holmes book, which is an extract from that, which Luke will be performing from tonight. We're also delighted to have with us Catherine Cook, who is the curator of the Sherlock Holmes collection at Westminster Libraries. So we'll be coming back to the panel in just a second. So I'm going to stop my screen share there in just a moment. If all of the panelists could close down their videos in anticipation, and we will be handing over to Luke so that he can do his performance.
Thank you very much. Jeremy Brett is Sherlock Holmes by Maureen Whitaker. Forward by David Burke. Arthur Conan Doyle was a man at war with his own genius. Detective fiction, a genre he had virtually created, seemed to him an inferior art form. The public knew better and refused to let matters rest. His Holmes was literally resurrected, after which he achieved a sort of immortality, and certainly provided Doyle with the kind of wealth few writers are blessed to enjoy. Again and again, in his private correspondence, he complained of the treadmill of the Sherlock Holmes stories. But when Doyle died, his creation was still alive, and so far as I know, is still striding up and down Baker Street today. Sherlock Holmes has continued to make money for others too. There have been feature films and television films based on the stories. In many cases, their authenticity is in serious doubt. Many people identify Holmes with Basil Rathbone's impersonation. But those Hollywood-based films bear little connection with the original stories beyond the actor's hawkish profile and deerstalker hat. I was myself lucky enough to be involved as Dr. Watson in the mammoth Granada TV series, which began in 1983 and continued long after I had left it. This series owed a colossal debt to its first producer, Michael Cox. It was he who set it up and was responsible for the inspired casting of Jeremy Brett as the famous detective. At the time, I knew Jeremy Brett only by name. He was chiefly famed for two things: his physical beauty, which even in middle age caused grown women to swoon, and for being a little mad. The madness, I soon discovered, was largely a delightful streak of eccentricity and determination to celebrate in spite of almost anything life threw at him. He once entertained a lady friend to lunch in the workaday BBC canteen by covering the plastic formica with a fine linen tablecloth, upon which he placed a brass candelabra and some sweet-smelling freesias in a fine china vase. While at Granada Studios in Manchester, I grew used to Jeremy arriving in the makeup room, extolling the beautiful day waiting for us outside. "But Jeremy," I would protest, "it's pouring with rain." "Of course, my dear," he would reply, "but the liquid atmosphere will make us both look wonderful." Jeremy was generous to a fault in celebrating the people who were working alongside him to create this phenomenal, successful series. He would use a Polaroid camera to take snaps of every member of the crew and post these up on a notice board for everyone to see, creating a warm family atmosphere among all those talented folk. He was also diligent, to the point of obsession, in ensuring that what the viewer saw and heard on screen was faithful to the word on the page. The collected stories were his Bible and went everywhere with him, and woe betide the writer or director who did not have a good reason for deviating from the original. He once insisted on a retake because he had worn his deerstalker back to front. No one but Jeremy could know which was the back and which the front of this eminently symmetrical hat. But he was not po-faced about these things and was the first to laugh at himself. He told me how he once accosted a helmeted police constable on Clapham Common and congratulated him at great length and in the most flowery of language on the increase in the number of bobbies on the beat recently promised by the Home Secretary. He concluded by saying, "We the public will all be grateful to you splendid fellows that we shall be able to sleep more safely in our beds." The policeman replied, "Why don't you piss off, sir?" and plodded on his way. The irony of this situation was not lost on Jeremy, and he could hardly contain his mirth. I miss my dear friend's passion and humour, qualities which he brought to his peerless interpretation of the world's greatest detective. David Burke, 2017. Sherlock Holmes. Quote, "One document, which is going to remain a secret for a few more years, is my original list of possible actors to play Holmes in the 80s. There are 40 names on the list, and they are not in alphabetical order, but Jeremy Brett's name is at the top. He seemed to me then to be the best equipped actor of his generation to challenge the great portrayals of the past. I had first read the stories in bound volumes of The Strand and grown up with Sidney Paget's evocative illustrations. They were the benchmark. And I wanted a Holmes with a splendid voice, a commanding presence, and the richly varied temperament which Conan Doyle had given him." Michael Cox, in the Sherlock Holmes Journal, winter 1995. Writing in the Sherlock Holmes Gazette, Michael gave further details of a very wet night in August 1981, in which he and Jeremy had discussed the role of Holmes. David Huggins had accompanied his father to the meeting with Michael and the head of casting for a dinner at a restaurant in Charlotte Street, and Jeremy would no doubt have felt the contrast with the warmth he had left behind at his home in Los Angeles. Granada had plans to construct a semi-permanent set for a future Coronation Street tour, and Michael had a £5 million budget to create a quality production. The strict control of the characters' television representations imposed by the Conan Doyle estate was about to end as the books came into the public domain, and Michael saw an opportunity to return to Conan Doyle's original work and provide the first authentic presentation of Holmes. To ensure advanced sales, the actor needed to be, quote, "of star quality, known to the American market." And although Joan Wilson Huggins' position and influence was not mentioned, Jeremy was extremely sensitive about the possibility that he might have been chosen at his wife's request. Above all, they needed, quote, "a classical actor with a marvelous voice and the appearance of a Sidney Paget illustration from the Strand magazine." Jeremy satisfied all the preferred criteria, but he may not have accepted the role, as many actors do not relish the thought of tying themselves too much to a part, and Sherlock Holmes has a reputation of being a signature part. Basil Rathbone had been strongly identified with the role long after he had left it. Quote, "I was so deeply concerned at being typed, more completely typed than any other classical actor has ever been or ever will be again." Basil Rathbone, in and out of character. Jeremy Brett knew it could have meant the end of his career, so the decision was a difficult one. Granada's reputation was exemplary at this time, and the company was renowned for its strong commitment to classical drama. Charles Dickens, Jane Austen, H.G. Wells, Saki, and Evelyn Waugh's Brideshead Revisited had attracted the best actors and earned enormous prestige for the company. Crucially, the talks included the need to be faithful to the Conan Doyle stories, plus the determination to achieve the same high standard for which Granada was noted in their drama programming. Quote, "Jeremy was interested, enthusiastic even, but of course unprepared to commit himself irrevocably until there were dates and fixtures on paper." Michael Cox. In the meantime, he was producing, directing, and playing the lead, Prospero, in The Tempest on stage in Toronto, Canada. Quote, "I was acting Prospero in The Tempest and trying to raise money to film the play in Barbados. Because it was Shakespeare, I couldn't find a penny. And then I did Robert Browning in The Barretts of Wimpole Street. I thought, oh, phooey, Holmes is old hat, been done to death. He didn't intrigue me at that time." Jeremy in Brett Noir. Jeremy had been reintroduced to the Conan Doyle stories by a friend in the Bahamas, where he was on holiday following The Tempest. Sherlock Holmes was very different from the romantic, heroic figures he had portrayed in his career. Yet he was intrigued. Quote, "It was there that I became fascinated with Conan Doyle's tales. I thought, oh yes, there are things I can do with this fellow. They held me entranced. The late Victorian era, full of gaslit, fog-bound streets, the scent of shag tobacco. Then the details began to pop at me from the page. Holmes chuckled and wriggled in his chair, as was his habit when in high spirits, lighting his long cherrywood pipe when he was wont to replace his clay when he was in a disputatious rather than a meditative mood. Holmes hunted among the grass and leaves like a retriever after a wounded bird, images that I had not seen before. The actor in me was on the hunt. The more I delved, the more I realized there was room for me to be someone else, to do something different. I discovered all sorts of things that I could do if I had the opportunity to do so. So I said yes, with enormous temerity and a certain amount of fear and an element of excitement." Taken from The Armchair Detective and forward to television Sherlock Holmes. If he had been successful in bringing The Tempest to the screen, it is unlikely that he would have accepted. However, Jeremy's attempts to explore the world-famous detective were not without some surprises. Quote, "When I tried to buy the Strand magazine, I couldn't find one. I couldn't find Doyle's complete works. I did eventually find one in foils in London, and it was an American edition which had been sent over and not been collected, and that's how I got one. Now, Doyle is everywhere." The red, leather-bound, illustrated Sherlock Holmes treasury, with his many underlinings and annotations, would become, quote, his Bible, to be applied conscientiously to any aspect of the present production which didn't fit with Doyle's original stories. He would carry it with him over the 10 years of filming the series. A time of total immersion in Holmes followed, which was Jeremy's familiar approach to a new part. He was a classically trained Shakespearean actor, with a love of words and the rhythm they created. His approach to a character would be based on his schooling in classic theatre, plus the training he received at the National Theatre under Olivier, and the Stanislavski method of inventing the man Holmes in which he would live. Quote, "I was talking about becoming. What I mean by that is an inner life. Watson describes you-know-who as a mind without a heart. That's hard to play, hard to become. So what I did was to invent an inner life. I mean, I know what his nanny looked like, for example. She was covered in starch. She probably scrubbed him, but never kissed him. I don't think he probably saw his mother until he was about 8. She was just a lady moving through a passageway, maybe caught a touch of her scent and the rustle of her dress. Probably he didn't actually see his father until he was 12. I guess college days were fairly complicated because he was quite isolated. He probably saw a girl across the quadrangle and fell in love, but she never looked at him, so he closed that door. And he became a brilliant fencer and a master at boxing, and many more tiny little details, which I have to kind of make up to fill this kind of well that Doyle so brilliantly left out. To bring it off the printed page for myself, I invented little stories about the loneliness of his university days, of his brilliance at sports, and his total removal from any kind of social activity. Everything to bring a little more illumination. In an interview for Pebble Mill at One, Jeremy said, quote, "I remember when Sir Alistair Cook said to me before we started, he said that the 3 most memorable people in the last 100 years are Churchill, Hitler, and Sherlock Holmes. Now, this was meant to encourage me. I was terrified. Well, that's really done it now. I mean, I didn't want to play the part in the first place because I thought I would fail, because there have been so many people playing it before. But to think that one of those 3 people never existed at all is extraordinary." He was now committed to the role and would make his interpretation of Holmes the very best. Michael said, "From the beginning, Jeremy plunged himself into every aspect of production. The scripts had been written during the long layoff, but he had his copy of the original stories, annotated and underlined after hours of reading and rereading, and he made a careful comparison. Jeremy was determined to speak Conan Doyle's original words in a definitive Sherlock Holmes to attain Michael Cox's vision of, quote, the best Sherlock Holmes series ever. No one had allowed the characters to speak the actual words in an authentic dramatization of the story before, and the prospect excited and challenged Jeremy. Quote, when we approached the scripts, I said, but you've asked me to do Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes. These aren't Sherlock Holmes, Doyle's stories. I mean, the adapters had gone so far away. And the script editor said, Jeremy, you're here to act, just get on with it. And I tipped the table over and my Dover soul landed in his lap. And that was the beginning of the tussle. I used to take the whole canon with me at the beginning of each film and fight for Doyle. After about a year and a half, I said, listen, if you don't start taking care of me, I may lose interest, because it was such a tussle. But then Granada Studios stepped in and was so remarkable and wonderful and gave me 2 weeks rehearsal instead of 1. So the first week I could fight for Doyle, and the second week I could work with my fellow actors. And that's basically how it's been ever since. NPR interview, 1991.
Thank you, Luke. That was absolutely wonderful. Really, really iconic comment there, upending the table to defend
It's a
Conan
wonderful
Doyle.
story, isn't it? It's full of lovely, lovely anecdotes like that, this book. It's some wonderful things, particularly how aggressively he fought to speak the words that were written down, even to the point of saying to writers, you read your version and now read the original. They're not as good, are they? So yeah, some wonderful stories.
Fantastic. We're going to jump across now to Jonathan. So Luke and Roger, if you could come off camera. We're now going to go across to the world exclusive, the very first performance of A Case of Identity by Don't Go Into the Cellar.
Hiya, can you see us?
Yes, we've got you.
We've got it. Okay.
Darlings, what a wonderful surprise it is to see so many of you here. I must confess, my dear, dear hearts, there are at least 100 things I wish to say to you. It has been an absolute age since you and I last set eyes upon one another. All of you, please gather round. As long as you are warm and dry, I am a happy and contented soul. Now, of course, the question is, my darlings, as to what you see before you now is entirely up to you. Now, I think that most of you, of course, are here to see you know whom. But as for the others, well, some of you perhaps are desirous of seeing Maxim de Winter. Now, it is true, I have spent much of my professional career in the 19th century. Occasionally, I have dipped a toe, tentatively at that, to the 1920s or beyond, but I have one of those faces, you understand. Some of you perhaps may be desirous of seeing before you, dear Dorian Gray. Then again, some of you will perhaps be hoping before your darling eyes, young Freddie. Or wasn't he an absolute angel? Such a darling voice as well. And then again, some of you may perhaps be wishing that here I sit before you, the Count Dracula himself. A wonderful role, all of them magnificent in their own way. But I believe most of you you'll be seeing me dressed rather funereally, as an undertaker, perhaps. Why, I mean, of course, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. None of this is real. You understand, imagine this to be the dressing room of my imagination, the green room of your mind. Please, my darlings, you will gather around if convenient. If inconvenient, please, you will gather around all the same. Make a long arm for a carafe of brandy and water. The evening gloom gathers apace. The weather can perhaps be intemperate. I feel that within our own social circle, within the bonds of friendship, there is so much to keep us warm. You know, in many ways, ladies and gentlemen, this is nothing more, nothing less than a case of identity. Well, I mean to say, who am I? Is it a case of Jeremy Brett playing Sherlock Holmes or Mr. Holmes playing Jeremy Brett? You know, I am even a figment of my own creation. There is no Jeremy Brett. Now, I was born at a very young age to Jeremy Huggins, near Coventry in Warwickshire. You may recollect the first of my darling Watsons, dear David Burke. Once he described me as being quite mad. Mad, I was livid. Well, I mean to say, my mother died when I was so young. I seem to have an agony of anger compressed within me. I seem to regard the universe itself as being at fault. Why she had been taken away from me when I was so needful of her companionship. And yet, to understand, I always had rather a wet, uninteresting face until I believe the age of 36 or so. I had so much anger, so much resentment within me to convey to the world at large, and yet all I could manage was a little pout of irritation. At least now I find I'm an aging, pretty face. I'm able to illustrate some of the feelings, the emotions that I feel within. As for my father was a military man, a soldier, a brave man. In many ways, not dissimilar to Sherlock Holmes himself. He kept his emotions very much contained within. Well, naturally, it was hoped on my father's part that I would follow in his militaristic footsteps. Now, it was to be first of many disappointments that my father received at my hands. Well, you understand, what is good enough for our fathers is never good enough for us, is it? Well, sometimes I wish, if only for my father's sake, I had joined the army, but I wonder what would the army have made of me, and what on earth would I have made of the army? I was bitten by the bug at a very tender age, deciding to be an actor. Even when I was at school, I was known to burst into song at the drop of a hat. My father despaired. Why could I not be like everyone else? Of course, he was absolutely determined the name of Huggins were not to be dragged through the mud, like being plucked through the footlights. Only said if I was to darken the family name, then I must eschew the name first and foremost. Jeremy Huggins was no more. Jeremy Brett was born. Et voila! Now, my darling friends, you may wonder how it is that I chanced upon the name of Brett. Well, Brett happened to be the name of the tailor who had made my first suit. Well, as I said to my father at the time, he ought to have counted his blessings it was not made by Moss Frost. You know, even to this day, I remain at something of a loss as to why I was considered for the role of Mr. Holmes at all. I'm so dissimilar to him. I'm far more like Watson. I mentioned Count Dracula earlier on. Fascinating role. So sensual. Good wonder that both men and women find him so irresistible. Well, it was while still in the United States. I had my first brush with Conan Doyle when I played Dr. John Watson himself. Charlton Heston, that wonderful Hollywood icon, played Holmes on that occasion. Now, I always regarded Watson as being such a sweet, kind, generous individual. Now, you'll have to take me a trust now, my darlings. I thought I'd be so much better as Watson. I'm gregarious by nature, kind, I trust, generous. What on earth did they see in me? Well, in spite of myself, I decided to audition, although I have to say, a dear, dear friend of mine, Robert Stevens, who played Sherlock Holmes, under the auspices of that terrific director, Billy Wilder, Robert advised me against accepting the part. You see, Robert Stevens had been driven to the very brink, to the edge of that abyss, gazing down into that seething, broiling cauldron. He had only played the detective in one film. There I was, poised to portray him in a dozen, a Baker Street dozen. Well, I mean to say, I'm nothing like him, am I? I always feel that the detective is far, far better suited to those dark, saturnine actors. Peter Cushing, for example, magnificent. I always believe it was Cushing who was able to draw forth the friendship between the detective and his Boswell, John. Basil Rathbone, of course, he hardly needed to spend any time in makeup whatsoever. He could almost walk straight onto the set. He was Sherlock Holmes. And then here was Jeremy Huggins, Barkswell in Coventry. We understand I was so tired of failure, but I believe you reach a point in life. You're done with failing. You don't wish to be drawn through that mill ever again. I shudder now when I think of my audition. Reliable witnesses claim that I must have resembled a gargoyle afflicted with a severe bout of St. Vitus's dance. I had taken it into myself to smear my face with various streaks of white grease paint, rather a violent shade of violet under the chin. And as for that walk, oh dear hearts, as though I were possessed by the spirit of some long deceased crab scuttling across, and the voice. And yet, in spite of that, I won the role. Still, at the very least, I do not have to sport a prosthetic nose. No, I am led to believe that is the ignominious fate shared by Christopher Lee when he played the detective in 1962, I believe. It was such a burden. I mean to say, it's such a weight of responsibility, I realized, pressing down upon my shoulders. The ideal Holmes does not exist. He is purely a fictional creature, a marvel of the imagination. How could I possibly hope to convey the Sherlock Holmes of that gentleman, and yet at the same time to satisfy that lady and those children? But as I say, I'd already tired of failing. One gets to the stage when one has failed enough. I regarded the role of Holmes as being a mountain to climb. I'd arrived at the juncture where there was no other option but to climb that mountain, and I did. Well, I mean to say, I wished at least to be able to say to myself, I did not screw it up entirely. It is so wonderful to see you all again. It's been so long. Well, as I say, I went through absolute agonies bringing Holmes to life. He and I are so dissimilar. We are chalk and cheese. Well, you might perhaps have heard that I am prone to occasional bouts of eccentricity. I can be something of an extrovert. When the mood is upon me, I'm rather taken with conversing with complete strangers. As for Holmes, he is absolute marvel. A face of marble. Trying to ascertain Sherlock Holmes is akin to snatching an arrow in mid-flight. Impossible, you understand. But then I was blessed by having such a wonderful cast, a wonderful team at Granada Studios. I mean, of course, Michael Cox, June Wyndham Davis, both of my Watsons, David and dear Ted. Not only were they the best of Boswells, I was blessed indeed to have called both of them my friend. But the agonies that I had to endure, well, I love Nosh. But every time Baker Street loomed, every time the shadow of Mr. Holmes was cast athwart my sunny disposition, I had to subsist entirely, my darlings, upon half a carrot, and perhaps the merest whiff of a stick of celery. Agonies, of course. The costuming was very flattering. Well, I'm not at all like Mr. Holmes's physique. I'm rather broad-shouldered, broad-chested, and Holmes is so narrow. I think it is when I found a walk, first of all. The rest of the character followed, these very long, elongated, pointed boots that I'm forced to wear. Oh, I don't mean that crab-like scuttle of a long-dead crustacean that I inflicted upon the casting director in the audition room. No, I mean the war. And of course, no doubt you have read about my problems. The press and their salacious rumors. I always maintain the press is a wonderful institution, provided, of course, one is aware of how to use it to one's own advantage. I've discussed my travails for more than enough. I want to dwell on them here. It is happiness that has brought us all together this night. So many of you darling, darling people thinking of me, even so many years after the event. Is it not a wonderful thing how Mr. Holmes has brought so many complete strangers from all over the globe together? Bless his dear heart. Well, of course, I soon fell into a routine of my own, an absolute perfectionist, and then I was aware, perhaps, this is what Robert was warning me against. Well, to begin with, we never had enough time in which to rehearse. I was determined if I was to be assigned the task of bringing Mr. Holmes to life, then I would do everything my damnedest within my power to see that Sir Arthur's creation was done justice. It took to moping about within my hotel room, having the meals sent up to me. And of course, Mr. Holmes is such a difficult character to cast aside at the end of a day's filming. I felt I had to cleanse myself. I had to be clean, really clean, you understand, to wash that awful gunk out of my hair. And then, of course, certain habits emerge. But to begin with, half a bottle of wine with dinner, and then a year later, a bottle, and then perhaps a glass of champagne, and so on and so forth. Or at least it wasn't a 7%. But when all is said and done, my darling friends, what is a magnum of morphine or a carafe of cocaine between acquaintances? I remember still when I made dear David, then bright red, crimson with embarrassment, I serenaded him across the crowded restaurant It was his birthday, I seem to recall. There was David with his charming wife, his dear young son. He was mortified. Oh, you understand, all of those rumors he had heard regarding my eccentricity were not entirely wide of the mark. No, I have been blessed with my Watsons. David and dear Ted, it is a curious thing, they were there for me when I was at my lowest ebb, particularly Ted. I remember one time when I was incarcerated, I thought perhaps the world had forgotten all about me, and yet whom was there to meet me? None other but Ted. He picked me up. Oh, I had long since cast aside the habit of driving. He took care of me. He made me a cup of tea. He was kind. There is such wonderful kindness, ladies and gentlemen. In spite of what the politicians would have us believe, people are so kind. I believe there is not enough kindness in the world, nor charity, and yet to see all of you here this evening. It's a curious thing how one takes certain things for granted. And I'm aware that when the mood was upon me, I said such awful things, and yet my friends forgave me. I could not blame them if they washed their hands of me altogether, and yet they did not. What on earth could I possibly ever have done to have deserved such friends? In the acting profession, you understand, addiction is far for the cause. I remember when I worked in the theater in the States, quite often I had to pass by the homeless, the addicts on the way to the theater stage door. We were on first name terms. Before too long, they would wave to me. And I would always stop to talk to them. There were individuals there, but for the grace of God to go, I and you and you. It is why you understand, when Granada and their wonderful team came to bring The Devil's Foot to the screen, I wished, temporarily at least, for Mr. Holmes to kick his habit. I was made aware how much of a role model Mr. Holmes was to children. I just received so many fan letters, sometimes 2,000 or so a week. I found it so wonderfully encouraging for all of these young minds, absorbent like a sponge. Now, of course, I asked Sir Arthur's charming daughter, Dame Jean, first. Did she agree with my idea that we ought to see Sherlock Holmes dispense with his drugs, with his syringe? God bless her, she agreed it was a capital suggestion. It is not to say that one day Holmes may not relapse, but I thought it was important that we show these young, impressionable minds that demons can, indeed are slayed, are laid low. It is a wonderful thing, is it not, about a broken heart? It allows so much love, compassion to come flooding in. Perhaps that is what hearts are there for, to be broken. It's always wonderful seeing the children, I mean, at the matinee performances. Oh, Ted and I, at Wyndham's Theatre initially, and then we toured The Secret of Sherlock Holmes. And so many of those children would wait for me at the stage door, and Ted. And once I remember one charming little boy, young Samuel, he showed to me a drawing he had done. He said, "Mr. Brad, I have brought this picture for you." And it showed Sherlock Holmes slaying a dragon. And he said, "Mr. Brad, Sherlock Holmes slays my dragon." Such a wonderful responsibility, don't you see? And of course, it was very flattering suddenly to find myself the object of female attention. All of those letters, they find Holmes to be irresistible. He is aloof, impregnable indeed to the finer, softer emotions. Oh, I know there is Irene Adler, but he has deliberately jettisoned himself away from all that is extraneous to his science of analysis and deduction. He always regarded Mr. Holmes to be a challenge. Holmes, of course, is a fantasy, a creature of the imagination. And yet Ted and David would always agree that we are weaving dreams, are we not? If only for the briefest of times are we making flesh and blood people's highest aspirations, bringing into reality all that so many people, both in this day and age and for a century past, hold so dear to their own hearts. What a responsibility. They have given us their dreams. Do you not feel that I owe it to them, at the very least, to tread softly? I remember at Wyndham's, dear Ted was quite often driven to distraction when I would perhaps extemporize with the script. If music be the fruit of love, play on. Give me excessive, that surfeiting the appetite may sicken, and so die. Oh, Holmes never lived, nor did he love, but I did. I never considered myself to be a star. No, that ship sailed. You see, I have one of those faces forever entombed within the 19th century. And I never have been the kind of person to go looking. Rather, I am the person who's found a twinkler. And dear Joni, she made me sparkle that little bit more. We are kindred spirits. She and I would finish each other's sentences. Joni would make me feel so alive, so vibrant. Joni, I know, would find all of you so extremely delightful. I feel certain that Joni and Mr. Biggs are getting along famously now. Well, Joni, you understand, is the kind of person, if one is fortunate, one is only ever likely to meet once in a handful of lifetimes. And who would have thought that I, did. Do you know, my darlings, I am forced to wonder if, in some other world, dear Jeremy Huggins did go about his own business. The world had never heard of Jeremy Brett. Oh, they found some other actor to play Mr. Holmes. Actors are, after all, tenpenny. Well, you know what they say about actors, they're only one step removed from politicians. I wonder if Jeremy Huggins made his father proud. Jeremy Huggins, I feel certain, would have followed in his father's footsteps. No doubt he resides still in Warwickshire. I do think that I would have liked him. I feel half inclined to believe Jeremy Huggins would have liked me. And yet, my darling friends, imagine how much Jeremy Huggins did not experience. All those wonderful people he would not have met. Joan, Mr. Binks, David, Ted, Linda. All those wonderful children. And David Huggins. Never could a father have been as proud as I am of him. It is a curious thing, my loves. Apropos, Mr. Holmes, I've already indicated that we chosen few, are selected, if only for a little while, to impersonate certain icons. Basil, Peter, and there will be others. I was fortunate enough to carry that baton, if only for a little while. As I've already said, I sincerely trusted I did not screw things up entirely. And you know, I wonder if Mr. Holmes and I would have enjoyed one another's company. I hope down the years I was at least able to see some of the cracks in the marble, to have come close at least to snatching that arrow in mid-flight. I am reliably informed that Sherlock and I share certain similarities. Our moods, perhaps our irritability. As you know, there have been instances where Mr. Holmes and I had arranged dinner. Once, I understand, we were in the same building, however, we never did meet. If, my darling, darling friends, any of you should meet Mr. Holmes, and it will only be a glimpse. There he is in the distance. You'll be certain to send him my love, will you not? To wave. Well, I fear the time allotted to me this night to see my friends once again draws inevitably to a close. Time is such a waste of money. It has been a pleasure to see all of you here. To think of the kindness, the shared kindness that has brought us as one. Promise me, will you not, to keep dry and warm, always. Be kind. One final thing, many years ago now, the past was the present. Now, one or two people had used to remark that I reminded them of Mr. Holmes. How similar we had used to look. But I had to let them down gently. My darlings, you see, it was only a case of mistaken identity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. That was incredible. I wish you could see all the comments that are coming through on the chat.
Thank you.
I will be saving this chat and sending it through to you, because I think you've touched so many people's hearts tonight. I think that was quite incredible.
Wonderful.
It's almost like spending an extra half an hour with Jeremy. It's just been incredible.
It's wonderful. Great. It's an honor to bring him back for one night.
Oh, absolutely wonderful. I'm going to switch across to the gallery view now for our panel. So what an amazing performance to follow, guys. But we're going to bring in our panelists now, and I can see that our fans have been firing through lots of questions on the Q&A window. So if our panelists could switch their video on, and we can jump into some questions. So good evening, everybody. A quick welcome. So I'm going to go around clockwise and say hello. So Jonathan's going to stay with us for the. Jonathan, you can either stay as Jeremy, or you can be Jonathan.
It's a weird night, being Jonathan, being Jeremy, being Sherlock, being Jeremy.
Jonathan Brett or
Jonathan
Jeremy
Brett.
Goodwin.
I'm here as Jonathan. Jonathan is back in the
room.
Yes.
And I'm going to go around clockwise and just say hi to Roger. Hi, Roger.
Hello, Steve, and thank you for having me this evening.
Oh, absolute pleasure, dialing in from Chelmsford. And we have Maureen. Hi, Maureen.
Hi, Steve. Nice to be with you.
Fantastic. Catherine. Hi, Catherine.
Oh, it's lovely to be here.
And welcome back, Luke, after that wonderful reading.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
And Jay, dialing in all the way from India, early in the morning.
Yes, fairly early in the morning.
I don't know how you do it.
Good evening to everybody else.
You always look so wide awake when we have these things at 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't know how you do it. Lots of coffee, probably. And Bonnie. Hi, Bonnie.
Hi.
Round the corner from Baker Street. Fantastic. So actually, I'm gonna kick off with Bonnie, if that's all right. As you're so close to Baker Street. You write a series of Sherlock Holmes novels for HarperCollins, and you've done some stuff for us as well. In your books, though, Holmes and Watson are kind of in their 30s, so a bit younger than Jeremy was in the Granada series. But you list him as one of your main inspirations. What specifically about Brett did inspire you for your series of books?
Oh, a great deal. I think his theatricality because that is directly taken from the canon, but he embodies it with such grace that you could only do with a classical theater training, I think. And he's so physically adept as an actor, and I think that comes right through the screen. And so in my head, my Holmes is very much like that, exuberant and theatrical, and also with this beautiful voice, because Jeremy Brett, as just portrayed by Jonathan, we're reminded of how he is kind of a man of the 19th century, having that classical theater training, and that because when you get classical theater training, you're trained physically. You have physical and there's a lot of exercises and so forth you do for the voice and the physicality that you may not get with other acting training. So just that kind of persona, and also the sort of glittering changeability of the man. He just flips on a dime, and he does on the pages. And so Jeremy embodied that, and I think that was partly Jeremy also. I mean, I think that's one of the things that he was in a way in which he was like Holmes, was this sort of extreme volatility. I mean, we might call it manic depression or whatever, but in fact he was so incredibly alive, and then so out flat. So many things, but those are some of the main ones.
Thanks, Bonnie. And Luke, a number of the actors who classically trained have played Holmes over the years. Do you think the classical training is really important when playing Holmes?
I think Bonnie's absolutely right in terms of Holmes is an incredibly theatrical character person, and classical training is essentially a theatre training. First and foremost, which is then sort of adapted to radio or television, later down the line. But it's all about, exactly as it says in that extract that I read, about the idea of inner life, creating these enormous backstories. And I think there is something about kind of the instinct of the actor to perform bigger performances. It's a training for being in large spaces. And I think one thing that incredibly that Brett does so well is kind of match both. At times he has this intense stillness with the camera. It's odd. It's almost like he's playing a game with the camera. Like, I'm not going to move, I'm not going to blink. And he talked quite a lot about the idea of how much he loved just being able to raise an eyebrow. But also he talked about how much he hated little ticks like that gave the game away. But then at the same time, he'll leap across a sofa and all over the set. And I think you can get the impression that the camera sort of men are following him around and trying to keep up with him, because he was so running on instinct. And I think that is a very classical kind of instinct that you get from the training. It's something that's it's sort of inbuilt to you. Follow that instinct, and don't be afraid of the theatrical. And in a character like Holmes, not being afraid of the theatrical, of the character being a little bit bigger and a bit more eccentric and flamboyant and a touch odd is fine. Decisions that you might make if you were playing any other 19th century character would be very odd. But with Holmes, you've got to pass. So I think the training absolutely helps for that.
And coming to Roger, why do you think no other portrayal has come close to the Granada series?
I'm not actually convinced that no other portrayal of Holmes from an actor has come close, because I think, for example, Douglas Wilmer in the BBC series from the 1964-65 series was absolutely superb. But the series as a whole, the Granada series, it did decline towards the end for reasons that are partly to do with Jeremy Brett's own declining health, and the fact that the whole company was taken over from the program makers by the money men. But the very best of Granada, which was quite a lot, is down largely to Michael Cox. As Luke told us, reading from Maureen's book, it was Michael Cox who conceived the series, who produced the first two series, who acted as executive producer after that, and finally returned as producer for, I think it was the Case book series. He was the one who supported Jeremy Brett throughout. They thought alike when it came to fidelity to not just the text, but the spirit of the original stories. And the result was something that as a whole has not been bettered and is unlikely to be for quite a while.
And Maureen, what inspired you to spend the thousands of hours putting together the books?
Oh, well, I was just so enthusiastic about Jeremy himself. When you see him on screen, he suddenly grabs the attention. Charismatic actor who gets right from the beginning, because I think it's the intensity of his presentation. The person he is the character he is. And all his performances, and I love so much of his earlier stuff, not just Holmes, that you can see him at work, but he becomes the person. All you people are experts on Sherlock Holmes, and I'm not. I love the stories, but I have really come to love them because of what Jeremy has done with the character, how he's actually created the man that is so idiosyncratic, so special, so fascinating that you want to know what is driving him onwards. And I just love everything that Jeremy has done. And I've seen a lot that most people haven't, which is locked away in the BFI, and we were given access to those things. And if we could see a complete account of all his work, I mean, I think we would all feel the same thing. I hope we would anyhow.
And coming to Jay, we know Jeremy is huge in Europe and in the States, but give us a flavour of how popular Jeremy is in India.
He is quite popular as the original Sherlock Holmes. So the thing is, well, I was born in the 80s, so I haven't seen the series when it was originally broadcasted in India, but my parents did see it. So in the 80s, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, that was the face of Sherlock Holmes that Indians saw. And coincidentally, as it happens, Jeremy Brett was also the first Sherlock Holmes that I saw on screen, but that was much later. So, and of course, if you ask me the most popular Sherlock Holmes, that would be Benedict Cumberbatch because of BBC Sherlock. But that is a modern, different Sherlock Holmes. That's a 21st century Sherlock Holmes. But when you ask about the original Sherlock Holmes, almost every Indian Sherlockian will say Jeremy Brett. There may be a few people who would say Basil Rathbone and Peter Cushing and others, but I would say about 90% of them will say Jeremy Brett, because that is the first Sherlock Holmes that we saw.
And Catherine, looking after the Sherlock Holmes collections for the Westminster libraries, how has Brett come up in the decades that you've been looking after the collection?
I think really in just what he did for the popularity of Sherlock Holmes. Since the Brett series started back in Britain in 1984, membership of the Sherlock Holmes Society of London basically doubled virtually overnight. We had a lot more people coming in, interested in Holmes, wanting to see them, wanting to look at the original Strand magazines, because the Granada series very, very consciously, and I think Brett himself was very conscious of this, literally used the illustrations, the Sidney Paget illustrations, for poses. You get the bit in the Naval Treaty with the moss rose, you get him sitting in a chair with his knees drawn up. They're all how Paget illustrated them. And before Brett, especially in America, I don't think the pattern, and Bonnie's going to tell me I'm wrong here, I don't think the Paget illustrations were particularly known. If an American thought of Holmes, they thought of the William Gillette image of Holmes that had been used in Collier's magazine as the inspiration for those illustrations. But after Brett, suddenly Holmes worldwide became, Jeremy Brett became the Sidney Paget, how we always thought of him in this country.
And Jonathan, I think there's been a ton of comments in the chats here that you've really captured a number of the mannerisms of Brett. What research did you do for tonight's performance? I've seen you do Strictly Sherlock and a number of others where you're very close to the Brett style. But
I mean, in fairness, I realise you'll find this difficult to believe. I was around. I was a child when the programmes were first shown. Used to watch the Jeremy Brett Granada series growing up, but not slavishly, and I hadn't seen them for 20 years, 25 years. And I was performing as Sherlock Holmes some years ago, and Nick Utterchin was there. He was reviewing the show. And afterwards, a lovely guy, as you know, and he said, well, can you tell me who your favourite Sherlock Holmes is? And I bet you're going to say Basil Rathbone, aren't you? And I said, well, yeah, he's one of them, isn't he? And Jeremy Brett. And he said, because my God, you've studied him, haven't you? And I haven't. And it's almost now a superstition. I don't wish to. Shah, my wife, is a Bretophile. I mean, she visited Granada Studios in the
That's my 12th birthday present, was a visit to the Granada Studios.
In the early 90s. When I was a child, I was taken to see Jeremy and Edward at Wyndham's Theatre, and then at the Alexandra in Birmingham. I used to write to him when I was a child. He sent my mom a Christmas card one year. So that was wonderful. Once or twice, even Jeremy pops up in my dreams, and he just flashes me.
It's a Facebook post that you posted about him that I responded to.
Oh yeah,
how we met each other.
Jeremy brought us together.
Yeah,
in fact, because unbeknownst to Sean and myself, we didn't know each other existed.
No.
But I was commenting upon how much I admire Jeremy Brett's performance, and Sean saw me, and Jeremy brought us together.
Yeah. The rest is history.
So, you know, in a way, I'm a little Victorian boy at heart. And I think with the Beatles, with the Rolling Stones, in America with Bob Dylan, with the Beach Boys, there are certain cultural icons, pop culture, that you're born with these things intertwined in your DNA. And I think for Britain, certainly Englanders of a certain age, Jeremy Brett is there as Sherlock Holmes. And I think with me, it's been a process of osmosis in a way. So a lot of this, I just think I respect and admire his interpretation. Since you know, the last couple of weeks when I was preparing this, and I learned so much more about the personal things that Jeremy was going through, and it you know, increased my admiration for him. And I know that people, you know, some of the Catchpenny biographies would say Sherlock Holmes drove him mad, or he thought he was Sherlock Holmes. Nonsense. He didn't think that at all. He was an actor and a professional first and foremost. it was coincidental. You wouldn't say, oh, Vincent van Gogh was manic depressive, but he painted a little. I think a person's medical condition is totally by the by, and the same with Jeremy Brett. I think he, as I said earlier in the performance, he realized that it was an honor to, and a great responsibility as well, to bring to life, if only for a little while, this character that is held so dearly to so many people's hearts. And I think he did it fully knowing it was a team effort. He never regarded himself as a star. He was a twinkler. And he acknowledged Michael Cox's contribution, June Wyndham-Davis, his Joni Sullivan, Ted and David. It was a collaborative effort to the makeup artist, cameraman. And I think we were very fortunate that they all had this shared vision in terms of being faithful and doing the right thing by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And I think their hard work has resulted in a great blessing and a boon for us, a Holmes for the ages. And it's been a wonderful honor for one and only to, I hope, bring him back for half an hour. Thank you, Jeremy.
And we've got another question for Bonnie. It said that people reveal themselves in their art. Do you think Jeremy, as he was playing such a well-known character and sticking so closely to canon, revealed some of himself in doing so? And does that affect your writing when you're writing about Holmes? Does that bring some of your character out as well?
I think if you're an actor or a writer, you can't help but be in your work. You can't keep yourself out of your work because that is the material you have to work with. But you know, it's interesting because he was stepping into the shoes, as he said, of a very famous character, one that had been portrayed many times, and yet he had to be a new person doing it. He was Jeremy. He wasn't Basil Rathbone or Douglas Wilmer or any of these other people. And so I think, you know, that is all you have as an artist is yourself. So you know, it's not even a choice. It's just the choice comes in how you do it. But you have to do it. so you know, I couldn't put the, you know, he said so eloquently himself in his interviews about some of these things, what he thought he brought to the role. But you know, this mercurial temperament was clearly in the canon, written in the canon, and described the character. And Jeremy had that character in real life to some degree. So that was a very, you know, fortuitous melding there. And also, I think, you know, so you asked me about my own writing. Of course, you know, I'm trying to emulate. So what I'm doing is trying to be as close as possible to, you know, to be inspired by and be as close as possible to Conan Doyle, which I hold in the highest esteem, but I can't be Conan Doyle. So I have to, you know, but in the emulation, sometimes you grow as an artist because those artistic constraints are the things that challenge you and make you do your best work.
And a question for Maureen that's come in via email. If you were to recommend one or two other performances of Jeremy's other than Sherlock for the fans to watch or consume, so that they get a feeling for his wider repertoire, what would you recommend? What would be that sort of top 1, 2 or 3 things?
Personally, I love his Shakespeare, in particular the Sonnio in Merchant of Venice, which is freely available to buy on DVD, and he does a wonderful job of the Sonnio. He has Olivia alongside him, and also Joan Plowright, and he does a brilliant job. The other one, which is only available on YouTube, but we have uploaded it because it was made available through the BBC store, is his Love's Labour's Lost, where he's the rather the mature but the almost comic performance of Barone, and that is wonderful, wonderful performance. If you wanted to have a straightforward comic performance, On Approval is very, very good. There is the Jeremy that shines. You can see that he's enjoying being this terrible Duke of Bristol, and he and his great friends does a brilliant job. So those are the three I would go for, but there's so many more, so much more to really enjoy and see Jeremy in his younger days, in his tremendous talents, which really do shine in those.
Well, we're getting lots of comments in the chat window from the fans from all over the world of their favourite Jeremy Brett performances. Jeffrey says, "I wish we could get hold of the Three Musketeers and Rebecca," and there are lots of others coming through as well. Merchant of Venice is another favourite. My Fair Lady.
An Ideal Husband is another one. The Wild, he does very well with Wild.
Can I just add something here? One of the things that hasn't come up so much is what a tremendous sense of humor he had as an actor, and I mean, and that's in the Sherlock Holmes books as well, and he just knew right where to zing those in. I mean, he obviously was a gifted comedic actor as well.
Well, he had a sense of humor automatically.
Yeah.
He just loved to laugh and to dance and to sing. And that really comes across in those performances.
Some really wonderful anecdotes in the book, Maureen, that I loved reading. It was really interesting of how mischievous he was throughout filming, and in particular when they were at Wyndham's doing The Secret of Sherlock Holmes. He was just a nightmare. Edward Hardwicke said, I used to have to come off stage because he'd just do something, one performance, he was walking around the stage clucking like a chicken, and I had to, but it worked, and I had to come off stage and just say to him, you've got to stop that, because he'd also start improvising lines in character. And I love the bit where Edward Hardwicke says, and you'd have to be on your guard because you'd have to keep up with him. You'd have to also start improvising to get your way out of that scene. And when you went and had a word with him to tell him off in the dressing room, he'd just give you a little wink and a smile, and you knew that he'd do it all over again, something completely different the next time around. And there are so many of those stories in the book that are really, really lovely. Breaking out into song in the middle of the restaurant, and Edward Hardwicke kind of, doing the, oh God, please stop, Jerry, but he was singing because I think it was Edward's birthday, and he just wanted to,
like you said,
sing. And brilliant, lovely anecdotes. But yeah, you definitely get the impression of a man who had a very mischievous sense of humor, and of course was able to bring that to the character.
I think with Jeremy, he was Jeremy, to quote Sabatini, he was born with the gift of laughter and a conviction that the world was mad. And he had a great lust for life. And another Ted Hardwicke story is where Jeremy was customarily always dressed in a black cashmere jumper and white cotton trousers, and he'd wear them to death. And one time, an abiding memory of Edward Hardwicke's is seeing Jeremy arrive at Granada Studios and hop out of a cab, and his white trousers parted company with a waistband. And Jeremy found it hilarious. He pulled his trousers up and went guffawing to the canteen. And Edward said that, whenever he thinks of Jeremy, it's always with a smile. And what finer tribute can any of us hope for that? To make people smile.
Yeah. Can I just mention, please, that Maureen mentioned Love's Labour's Lost. The first time I saw Jeremy on stage, 1968 at the Old Vic, Olivier's production of Love's Labour's Lost, in which he played Biron. And the cast, my God, included Ronald Pickup and Charles Kay, among others, both of whom later appeared in the Granada TV series. And would you believe Jim Dale? Yeah, as well as Joan Plowright. Wonderful production. And now at Jeremy's memorial service, at St. Martin in the Fields, Edward Hardwicke told of how Jeremy once, to cheer himself up, wrote himself a fan letter. And he asked for an autograph. And his friend said, did you actually reply to this? And he said, no, I'm not mad. Besides, the bugger didn't include a stamped addressed envelope.
Wonderful story, wonderful.
We have a comment in from Francisca. She says, don't forget the superbly funny performance in An Ideal Husband.
Yes, you do. And a very fun one too, which is most unusual for the later performances. It's good to see him as the romantic lead, as that's what he is.
You know, Maureen, your book has turned me on to so many Jeremy performances that I didn't know about. You know, I've sort of gone on a treasure hunt off of your book.
Oh, good. I'm so pleased.
And Jay, is outside of Holmes, is Jeremy known for other performances in India?
Well, he's known for being Freddie because, you know, My Fair Lady, all-time classic. Other performances, I am not very sure. The Merchant of Venice, yes, for school kids, because we saw that in school when we were studying Shakespeare. But others, no, not so much. He is primarily the original Sherlock Holmes for us.
And Catherine, do you have a particular favourite of Jeremy's performances?
To be honest, I think it would be Picture of Dorian Gray, but I have to say I haven't seen all that many of them in recent years. I probably saw them decades ago, a lot of them.
And a question for all of the panel from several people. Who was the best foil for him in the Granada series? Do you have a favourite between them all, or was there a equally different and equally good? Maybe start with Roger.
Well, I think it's got to be Eric Porter as Moriarty. He was just so sinister, as well as obviously deeply intelligent and forceful. I can promise you the one, but not the other. Wonderful, wonderful.
And Maureen?
Oh my word, very, very difficult to choose. I have watched them and watched them so many times. I have to stop every now and again to take breath and look at other things beside. But I come back and I think, oh, this is wonderful. I love the red-headed league where he jumps over the sofa, and the humour that the one who plays Jabez Wilson, I can't remember the actor's name. It
Roger
is one.
Hammond.
Thank you, Roger. But it's just the humour that comes out, and he said, my reputation will be shipwrecked if this continues, and you feel so much for Holmes at that particular time. But he has made himself look a fool, and he complains that he's been made to look a fool, and so you can see why they're so amused by the whole situation. Patricia Hodge in the Second Stain is a wonderful partnership, if you like. And in fact, Patricia did say that she was entranced by the man that was Jeremy, and they had such ambitions to do further things. With Noel Coward, but of course Jeremy was too ill to be able to make sure that happened. But I could go on. I just love the whole thing. I think it's wonderful.
Luke, any particular episode for you?
Well, I think it has to be The Hound of the Baskervilles with the fantastic hound that they chose for that episode. I only watched that episode, Maureen, having read your chapter on it, and everybody kind of pretty openly saying, yeah, the hound didn't work. We could have got a better hound with all of our money to make this brilliant thing. We could have got a better hound. And yeah, and I went back and looked at it, and yeah, I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. I loved, they really stuck with it though. They really played like, this is not a large Doberman. This is a a killer hound, and we will play that because that is what is written. But yeah, a slightly underwhelming hound that they did their best with. I thought it was fantastic. I loved it. Again, that theatricality, that kind of little wink and nod to the period and what they were working with, I thought was great.
We have a very specific question for Catherine from Tim. How large is the Sherlock collection at Westminster now?
I couldn't give you numbers and shelf space, but it currently takes up fully 3 large basement rooms at Mayfair Library, which is sadly closed and has been for a year due to the pandemic, so we can't actually access it at the moment, but it's a good 3 rooms. I should say it now also includes on deposit the archives of the Sherlock Holmes Society of London. So half of one of the rooms is boxes of that.
And somebody's asked, have you ever thought of doing a virtual tour of the shelves with somebody talking people through it? That might be a fun thing to do on Zoom.
We haven't, because until a year ago, we hadn't really thought about doing virtual tours and things on Zoom. People actually came, and I do a physical tour and talk to them and show them things. And since the pandemic, I haven't been able to physically get down there to do it. It is certainly something we could consider doing in the future. There is a written description on our website that goes through what we've got and talks about aspects of it.
Fantastic. Maybe you can pop into the chat the link to the website so that the
I'll go and try and find it.
or email it me and I'll send it out to everybody afterwards. Maybe that's the way to do it.
Probably easy.
Catherine, is your collection the collection correct? Is it anything to do with the one in Portsmouth? Because when we were when we were on tour, we went into the Portsmouth archive and had a lovely look at some of the letters and all his spiritualist photographs and things that he collected. It was really fascinating.
The thing about the Portsmouth collection is it was the collection of Richard Lancelyn Green, one of the foremost Sherlockian Doylean scholars who very tragically died some years ago. He left his collection there. He was a private collector. He had a lot of what they'd call primary material, actual letters, original material. The Westminster collection is a collection that's been built up completely by the, originally Borough of St Marylebone, latterly City of Westminster after London reorganisation in the mid-60s. And it is a collection of books and secondary material. We do have a complete run of the Strand magazine. It is probably the only place you can publicly go in and look at any Strand magazine from 1891 up to 1930. We also have complete runs of the Sherlock Holmes Journal, Baker Street Journal, and what I would call a representative selection of the books published. There's no way we can afford all of them or get everything, but we try to get the best. And we've also got a very good collection of all the published facsimile manuscripts. So you can actually see what Conan Doyle wrote, but in facsimile.
So one of the questions that's come through with the kind of controversy over the Sherlock Holmes in Enola Holmes being, in inverted commas, too sexy, is Jeremy Brett's Holmes sexy, and why?
Over to Roger.
I don't know who wants to take that one first.
I'll take that one. I fell in love with the character of Sherlock Holmes on the page at age 10, and have had a crush on Sherlock Holmes the character ever since then. And I have to say that when I'd seen all the Basil Rathbone and I'd seen other things, growing up and so forth. But when Jeremy Brett, the first episode, and he's in the chair with his back to us, and he turns around and faces the camera, it was like, oh, there he is. And it was just love at first sight. So yes, I would say he's sexy in this.
I think that's the thing. Conan Doyle, when he describes Sherlock Holmes, he doesn't really sound terribly attractive at all. He almost like a Native American, outside the the old tobacconist shops in America, Native American. And even Jeremy said he felt that he was too pretty to be Sherlock Holmes. But I think it's with the onset of social media and with the modern age, I think Jeremy Brett was probably the first of the heartthrob Sherlock Holmes performers. And since then, of course, Robert Downey Jr., Benedict Cumberbatch, Johnny Lee Miller, Basil the Great Mouse Detective.
It's interesting that you say his description was not all that attractive in the originals, although every now and then there were little hints of it. But what was strange is that Paget's drawings themselves varied hugely. Sometimes he was quite unattractive in them, and other times he was very handsome. So even Paget himself imagined him differently. And then Frederick Doris Steele's drawings cut shortly after and at the same time were very handsome. And I think that helps establish the character in the public mind as a rather attractive man. But I think smart people are sexy, so that's my thing. I think as they said in BBC Sherlock, brainy is the new sexy. I mean, I think that is what is one of the essential attractive qualities of Sherlock Holmes, is this brain, this giant brain, and his competence.
Very interesting comment from Yui, which is that Conan Doyle thought that Paget's Holmes was too attractive, as far as he can remember. He didn't like the fact that Paget made him too attractive.
Well, it was his brother, of course, Walter Paget.
That's right.
Model.
But he's still very. Sorry.
So it's the wrong brother. He was expecting Walter Paget to be the illustrator, and it was Sydney had opened it, and he'd more or less accepted the position straight away. But of course, he was using his brother as his model for his artwork, and he was more attractive than he was, obviously.
So this question has caused a lot of comment in the chat window, as you can imagine. Talia is saying that her first introduction to Brett was in The Devil's Foot, and if anybody is disagreeing that he didn't look good in there, I am disagreeing. I fell over head over heels in love with him from The Devil's Foot, apparently. We have confidence is the sexiest attribute, and that's why Holmes oozes sexiness. Jay, is he seen as, you've already commented, is Cumberbatch the big heartthrob in India?
Currently, yes. It depends on who you ask and what age group you ask. So if you ask my parents' generation, outright Jeremy Brett, they're like, who is Benedict Cumberbatch? But if you ask the young ones, then of course there is Benedict Cumberbatch.
I think I've seen a lot of young people though come over to the Jeremy camp in recent years, but they get interested through one of the the elementary or BBC Sherlock, and then they start reading the originals, reading Conan Doyle, and then they start watching the Granada, and they're like, oh my God, these are quite good, and because it's another whole dynamic to the character, and then once they've read the original stories, then they go, oh well, this is closest to them.
True, that does happen.
And does anybody want to comment on the latest adaptation that's just broken, which is the Irregulars? I haven't seen it myself.
I've watched the first 3 episodes. It's a bit woke.
How is Holmes?
We haven't really seen much of him yet. He's kind of been in the background. He kind of all you've seen is that he's landed on the bed and been sick, but you haven't seen him as the person yet. Watson is black. I'm guessing they're going with the Bridgerton colourblind casting. I see what they're trying to do. The music in the background is very intrusive.
Because it's Victorian.
The setting is Victorian. The scenes are brilliantly set. The sets are great. However, the intrusive modern music is appalling. The supernatural elements, I think Conan Doyle would have kind of liked that. However, yeah, it all feels a little bit like it's trying too hard.
The good thing is, it's a very broad church. So if you don't like the irregulars, there's Benedict Cumberbatch, or there's Jeremy Brett,
absolutely,
or Basil Rathbone, or Arthur Wantner, another great Holmes actor.
Yeah, I was lucky to be invited to a private preview. I think there must have been a whole of a lot of other people were there as well. Online preview of the first episode of The Irregulars.
Yeah.
You have to accept that this is a fantasy version, not only of Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson and The Irregulars, but of history. Once you accept that, I really enjoyed it. I have to say, I really did.
Yeah, it's a bit of fun,
Specialists
definitely.
are amazing.
Yeah, but the sets are fabulous, absolutely fabulous.
Oh yeah.
I've read it's like the Downey Jr. series with Stranger Things.
Yeah, it is.
With a supernatural twist. So it's great. Bit of steampunk.
I like that in that set. For me, it was the music. Get rid of that and it would have been fine.
You're getting some acknowledgements of that position on the chat, by the way, Sian. So
thank you.
Not a lot of love for the musical score, definitely.
No, that was the one thing that it really edged it for me.
Bring back silent pictures, I say.
Well, not silent, but there's atmospheric music and there's very, very starkly over intrusive modern. Oh look, we've put a rap score on, and that felt too try hard for me. You've already done the inclusive thing. We've already suspended disbelief for a lot of it, and that's fine. We've got there. Didn't need to do that.
Very interesting. Yeah, very interesting question just come through. Is if Jeremy was to come back, which modern series or modern adaptations would you want him to be involved in? It's an interesting question.
Well, Douglas Wilmer was very pleased to be invited to play a cameo role in Sherlock as the extremely aggrieved member of the Diogenes Club. So perhaps Jeremy would have enjoyed doing something like that.
Francisca has commented she would like to see him as the next Doctor Who.
That would have been cool.
I would like to see.
Hang on, how old would he be now?
Is it the Time Lord meant to be old?
How old was William Hartnell?
William Hartnell was younger when he took the role.
Yeah, but the character he was playing.
He was.
Well, if we're totally fantasizing, I would love to see a filmed version of his Dracula in his prime.
Oh yes.
Oh indeed.
I don't know. I don't go with the romantic idea of Dracula.
I think that was the Edward Gorey version, and the sets were as much a star as Langella and Brett and Terence Stamp. And I've got to say, Brett looked absolutely fabulous. The shot with the
I agree. Yes. He did.
But
I have watched the Langella version. It is really very well worth watching. And I imagine Jeremy in exactly the same role and the same positions, and it looks really, really good.
But for me, it's got to be Max Schreck in the original silent Nosferatu.
Maybe silence is golden. We got close with the last vampire, the scene at the beginning with Jeremy and the rat's teeth.
Yeah.
That's the closest that we've got to seeing as Dracula.
Well, we've got a few moments left. I think Zoom's going to shut us down in 5 minutes because we'll have hit the maximum 2.5 hours, I think, in total. So just maybe we run around the room with some final comments on Jeremy. Start with Jonathan off that wonderful performance of Jeremy tonight. What were your final passing thoughts?
You know, the fact that we're all here, all around the world, talking about Jeremy Brett 30 or 40 years after he played, just shows what a wonderfully positive impact he made, not only in terms of his work, but also in terms of his raising awareness for mental health issues. He brought everything he had to the role and more. And I think his is a performance that will last for the ages. And he was, by all accounts, a true gentleman too. So Jeremy, we salute you.
Yeah, yeah.
Roger?
I'm just going to raise a little point. Jonathan, I think it was, or possibly Luke, or even Maureen mentioned Jeremy's beautiful voice. Now, in the original stories, Watson describes Holmes's voice as high and strident. The only actor I can think of offhand before Jeremy took the role who had a really beautiful voice was John Gielgud, who once said, "Oh, they can't bear to hear me say shit in my beautiful voice," when a play he was in didn't go down with the audiences. But it's become something of a standard since Jeremy, with actors like Clive Merrison, for example, who again has this wonderful theatrical voice. I don't object to this at all. It's just an interesting contrast between what we're hearing and what we read about in the original stories. That's all.
And Maureen?
Oh my word. Just a couple of things. First of all is that it is sign of 4 is on the examination syllabus. And both my granddaughters have studied it in their English literature exam. So my youngest
GCSE or A-level?
This is GCSE, and it has been there for the last 4 or 5 years, sign 4.
Oh my God, so lucky.
So they are using the Jeremy version, the Granada version is being shown to the children because obviously this is the best way to prepare the actual text. So Cumberbatch didn't fit at all at the time, it just wasn't suitable. The other thing is I'm so desperate to get a plaque on the bonded warehouse to celebrate the whole production. And it's been halted because of the pandemic. Everybody is not at their desk anymore and I can't follow it through. So please, can you think about that? And if you've got any other suggestions of what we might do to get something in place for his 25th anniversary, which was last year. We need something really to celebrate Jeremy's achievements and why we're remembering him.
Yeah.
And Jay?
Well, I don't really have anything else to add.
Luke?
Well, I think for me, I've been very lucky to have played Sherlock Holmes, and I think it was a fascinating thing to read, Maureen, your book about Brett, because it was so reassuring to hear this incredible actor's journey with this character, and to hear of his own kind of feelings of like, oh my God, so many people have played this before. There are so many iconic versions of this character. And I think it was fascinating as an actor to read just how fantastically he dealt with it, which is by going, just go back to the material and just see what leaps out the page. And yeah, what a wonderful, imaginative, barnstorming performance, really. You know, and like you've said, the iconic version of Sherlock Holmes. He is Sherlock Holmes. He does become Sherlock Holmes in that series, and I think it's there for everyone to enjoy.
Catherine?
Yeah, I think perhaps from me, one little anecdote about Jeremy Brett. Obviously, many years ago, I was fortunate to go up and spend a weekend on the Granada set. It was the time they were filming The Empty House. And it was an evening shoot on the Baker Street set. One of the crew had an accident. He wasn't badly hurt, very glad to say, but they did think it was bad enough to call on an ambulance. It was a cold evening. And Jeremy Brett stayed with the man who'd been hurt. He didn't go back to his nice warm caravan because he wasn't actually filming at the point, but he was dressed as Holmes in the top hat, long black frock coat. He came over to tell us afterwards, roaring with laughter, because when the ambulance arrived, the ambulance man looked at the injured man on the ground, looked at Brett, then looked at the man on the ground and said, "Really, it's not that bad. You didn't need to call the undertaker."
Wonderful. And I think we'll leave the final comment to you, Bonnie.
Oh, you can't follow that one. Catherine, that was great. I guess Jeremy has inspired me in so many ways, because over a period of 10 years of intense, interaction and involvement with just this character, and this is something that I've just done for the last 10 years, and I basically admire so much his mastery, his courage, the depth of his commitment, his soul, and also his incredible sense of humor throughout all of this. So he's just a consummate artist and inspiring to me.
It's been an absolutely wonderful evening. A huge thank you to both of our performers tonight. Amazing reading.
Wonderful.
Just really bringing Jeremy back for 30 more minutes for us tonight was just quite incredible, and a wonderful panel from all over the world. And a huge thank you to all the fans. To have 200 Jeremy Brett fans from all over the world, from 16 different countries, joining and commenting and interacting has been absolutely wonderful. So thank you very much, guys. We'll do what we can to get the recording all sorted and loaded up so that people can watch it back. But have a wonderful rest of your evenings and early mornings, Jay and others far away. Thank you so much for tonight, and look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.